We map the landscape in order to see what's really going on. This helps us answer the why of movement. Why should we move here and not there? For centuries, military leaders have used maps to make winning moves on the battlefield, and explorers have used maps to identify new trade routes, and they're still using them today. Scientists use maps to understand our planet better, and track moving threats to us, like the coronavirus. And even football managers use maps to tell players where to run to and why there. You use maps on a daily basis to decide how to get to one place from another, and that's because maps are useful. And there are 6 characteristics that make maps useful. 1. They're visual. For example, you can scan a map of an entire country in seconds. 2. They're context specific. It's a map of your country, not somebody else's. 3. Maps have an anchor, such as a compass, so we always have a consistent point of reference. 4. Maps show components, relevant cities, rivers and borders. 5. They show the position of those components relative to the anchor. So we learn that this city is north of that one. And this helps us make moves. If we want to get to that city, we know we have to go north and not south. In a previous video, we looked at the case of Themistocles, the Athenian general defending Greece from a Persian invasion. He used a map which had all 6 key characteristics. It was visual, so he could scan all of Greece quickly. It was context-specific. It was a map of Greece, not of France. It had an anchor showing north. It had key components, cities, armies, and the physical features of the terrain. And because of the anchor, he could see the position of these components. He could see that the Persians were attacking from the north, and this enabled him to make moves. Moves needed to counteract the Persians by sending his forces north, not south. If all Themistocles had was a SWOT analysis, the kind of tool we use in business today, he would have been in trouble. A SWOT analysis is not visual, and it has no anchor, so it would not have told him where to focus. It also fails to show the position of any components, so he wouldn't have been able to use it to identify strategic moves. There are lots of things in business called maps, but none of them are real maps. Mind maps, for example, are visual and context-specific, and they show components like departments. But they have no anchor, so you don't know the position of these components or how you might move them for strategic advantage. Road maps are also not real maps. They are visual and context-specific and show components like projects. But they use time as an anchor, which is problematical. The future is unpredictable, so you can't say with any confidence where a component will be in 2, 5, or 10 years' time, which means the roadmap is limited in helping you make real strategic moves. Process maps are useful and have many characteristics of real maps. However, they too are not real maps. For while they show you how a customer moves through your process, they don't show you how your process is changing over time. And in reality, everything is changing all of the time. 10 years ago, the Moscow metro system was already one of the most extensive in the world, but it continues to evolve. If you tried to navigate around the Moscow metro today with a map from 10 years ago, you'd get lost pretty quickly. So even if something large and relatively fixed like infrastructure evolves, your processes are evolving too, and your maps must reflect that. The idea of using maps for strategy is not new. In September 2000, the Harvard Business Review featured an article with Kaplan and Norton of balanced scorecard fame. Kaplan and Norton advised us that if we're having trouble with our strategy, we should map it. But this was their map. It was context-specific, it did have components, and it even had an anchor, in this case shareholder value. But position was arbitrary, meaning it was useless for making moves. And how visual is this? Can you imagine Themistocles trying to convince the Spartan king Leonidas that he should lead his elite Spartan army on a suicide mission to Thermopylae with this map? If you want to discover strategic moves, you're going to need a real map. And the only maps in business with all 6 essential characteristics of real maps are Wardley maps, which we call power maps. So let's have a look at what makes these real maps. This is a graphic with 3 English cities, Leeds, Birmingham, London. Now, if we move Birmingham like this, can we describe this change in any meaningful way? The answer is not really, because this is just a graphic with no real meaning. It doesn't have an anchor, so it can't be used to describe the position of these cities or what moving them around means. But if we had an anchor, a compass showing north, we can now describe the position of these cities. Leeds is in the north, London is further south, Birmingham is in the middle. So if we move Birmingham again, we can now describe this change. Birmingham has moved south. And that's because this is a real map, albeit a very simple one. It has all 6 of the required characteristics. What this tells us is that in real maps, space has meaning. And if we move something on a map, it changes the meaning and we can describe it. For example, if we moved Australia next to Europe, this suggests it would only take about an hour to get from London to Sydney rather than a day. And if Themistocles had sent his forces south instead of north, that would have changed the entire direction of the Greco-Persian Wars. That space has meaning is the simple idea which makes Wardley maps so powerful for identifying strategic moves. If you want to create a real map of your organization, you need to start off with your users' needs. This is your anchor. Let's imagine that we own a cafe, one known for selling the best coffee in town. Our users are the public who need cups of coffee. But the cup of coffee doesn't appear by magic. We need a lot of other components to make them. We need coffee beans and cups. The coffee beans need water and a coffee machine to turn them into coffee fit for drinking. And that coffee machine needs a power source to run it. Now we have a visual representation of our cafe, which is context-specific. We also have an anchor, the need the public has for drinking cups of coffee. And we have the components we need to make those cups of coffee. We can see the position of these components relative to the anchor. Components closer to the cup of coffee, the coffee beans in the cup, are more visible to the public, so these are the components they are interested in. For example, does the coffee taste nice, and is it served in a clean cup? While the components further away from the anchor, the water and the power, are less visible to the public, so they probably don't care about those as much. This is the chain of activities our cafe engages in to create value for customers and hopefully ourselves. But this is not yet a map, because at the moment we have no concept of movement. To see how we can add movement and make a real map, let's look at the component at the bottom of the value chain, power. In 400 AD, what became known as the Baghdad Battery delivered the first electrical current. This would have been so novel that few people would have known what to use it for. But today we have power stations across the world providing us the electricity we need as a utility service. The question is, how do we go from the uncharted component on the left to the industrialized component on the right? The answer is, we start to get more certainty about something, for example what it's used for, and therefore the component starts to evolve. We increase certainty by providing information, like this picture here, which used to be placed in hotel rooms, telling people how to use the first electric lights. Or like this guide to using a telephone, telling people which way round to hold the receiver and how loud to talk. Simon Wardley, the creator of Wardley Maps, researched how components evolve along an axis of ever-increasing certainty, and he found that there were 4 distinct phases. At first, a new component is treated as a thing of wonder that might change the future. Electricity certainly did, and we talk about things like quantum computing in much the same way today. As we increased our certainty about electricity, we started focusing more on where it was being built and what it was being used for. As certainty increased further, our focus switched towards operations and maintenance of the component or feature differences. Was this version better than that version? Until finally, there is so much widespread certainty about a component that our only interest is in what we use it for. We start to take the component, like electricity, for granted, even though it used to be a thing of wonder. Today we forget it's even there, until there's a power outage or we have to pay the bill. We can see now how power evolved across the 4 stages of evolution, from the uncharted stage where the component, the Baghdad Battery, was new and uncertain, to the next stage when we were still learning about the component as the likes of Hippolyte Pixie were producing the first custom-built generators, which was followed by the product stage with generators, like Werner von Siemens' dynamo, being made for ever-increasing mass markets as demand was growing, until finally power became industrialized, provided as a highly standardized utility service with high-volume operations. And this now gives us the basic shape of a Wardley map. The further components are to the left on this map, the more uncertain, novel and risky they are, while the further to the right components are, the more they are certain, standardized, and a cost of doing business. So if we now add in the value chain of components from our cafe, and then place them according to how involved we think each one is, we get a real map of our business. We can see that coffee beans are a mature product. Cups are more of a commodity, while power and water are also commodities that are provided as utility services. And the question you're probably asking yourself now is, so what? Well, once you have a map, you can invite others to challenge it. They will point out things you've missed, like service, and you can learn how each of these components might evolve over the future. You can start to address problems you won't be able to see if you don't have maps. For example, look at this simple profit and loss statement from our cafe. Can you see if there's anything wrong? It isn't easy to spot straight away. But if we put the same information on a map, we should be able to spot the problem quickly. Why are we custom building our coffee machine? It's costing us twice the amount of profit we make from each cup of coffee sold just to maintain it. We could save a huge amount of money if we bought it as a standardized product. So why are we doing this, you may ask? Maybe a marketing guru told you that your coffee machine is special, and it's the reason your customers come to your cafe. But the coffee machine is not a very visible component to the public, so it's unlikely that's the thing that they care about most. But maybe the marketing guru was onto something. Maybe customers do want some kind of special status symbol to go with their coffee, something to show that they are not just ordinary coffee drinkers. And as we've just saved a significant amount of money by buying a standard coffee machine, rather than all the extra expense of maintaining our own custom-built one, we can now reinvest that in other things our customers might value more. Maybe we can offer them coffee brought through ethical trade, or coffee brewed with renewable energy. This might be a bit more expensive, but we've just saved money on the coffee machines, so we can reinvest into something customers do care about. And if they value this, then they might be willing to pay a premium price for it. And this is just the start of what you can do for your organization once you have a map. If you'd like to learn more about what else is possible, visit the benefits and method pages on powermaps.net.